Actually, you guys know that Jordan's been saying, Jordan and I have been saying the story's going to come out soon. It's going to come out soon. The reason we knocked on all those doors, the reason we were here for 3 weeks last month, um, the story is delayed a little bit. I'll let Jordan get into that. It's not because of the story. The reporting is super airtight. Like when you guys see this, and I hate teasing it so much, like I want to show it to you now because and not just because it's like a great story. It's so tightly reported. It's airtight, but because this affects people's lives. The governors declare the water safe. All the officials are saying the water is safe. The water's not safe. This story proves it, or at least proves a hell of a lot more testing needs to be done. And meanwhile, people are
Regulated
sick,
testing.
dying. Yes, regulated testing done the right way.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, while we can't release the story quite yet, people are getting sick and dying. And so
Yeah.
that's hard
Yeah.
because we have this information and we want it out, not for us, but for the people. So
Yeah.
it's like, and then once you see the documentary Ty's been working on, it's even more impactful. You see the
Yeah.
people and they're suffering. You see their rashes.
Mhm.
You see their children. You see the older people who, I mean, it's it's incredible. It's hard to put into words because
And you hear about them talking about what's going on now. The rashes that you see now, the water that you see, that you will see in this documentary is not what was going on last year or 5 months ago. This is present day. This is still happening. Those rashes are still present and coming every time they expose their bodies to the water, every time that they internalize the water. So yeah, it lets you know that they're far away from the water crisis is far away from being over. You know.
and it makes me so mad. I think it was what the Washington Post or the New York Times, one of those, same old, same old. But there was some opinion piece released this past week saying kids in Flint were never poisoned or some. I mean, that's not exactly what the title was. It's similar. Maybe you guys can find it or I'll
Was it
put
a
it in the
question
description.
out there?
It was some opinion article someone wrote, and you wouldn't
The
think it was a
Washington
question.
Post?
It was one of those. It was like a
Oh,
highlight. It was New York Times or Washington Post. It was
Jesus
one of those,
Christ.
and like the kids in Flint were never poisoned, and it's like we're trying desperately to get this real information, this investigative reporting released, and someone can release that bull crap.
I hope that that was the title. It was a question mark after it, like they were just being ironic or
Yeah, I
something.
need to find that. I just thought of that again. But so we're back in Flint. Story's not going to be released today, was its target. So it's going to be delayed. That doesn't mean we're going to just sit and do nothing. We have a lot planned. We're still making plans with some residents and sources here. One of the main things we're going to do is so you guys know that the free bottled water pods have been closed down based on false information, faulty testing. So what we're going to do is find residents who are struggling to get water to
Yeah.
their homes. So they have churches and some organizations. They organize funding for bottled water. They organize, centers, like people can go to these churches and stand in line and get water for free. However, there's not enough to go around. Like everyone tries, but there are, it's still estimates, but it's between 80,000 and 90,000 residents. And every one of them needs this free bottled water because the water's not safe from the tap. Um, but who can stand in 4 hours in a line to get water,
Yeah.
to get a couple cases of water?
It was a couple people when we some of the interviews that we did the last time we were at the house, and they were talking, bringing up a few issues about the lack of water pods. First off, this is this very impoverished community, but still a lot of people working. They're working. They may be getting paid minimum wage, which is under a living wage, but they're working. So they get up in the morning, they pass a water pod. The line is already long. They have to work 8 hours, then come back. By the time they get home or go to the water pod, they're out of water. Even if a lot of them have the time to stand in line, and by the time they get to the front, the water's gone. We passed the water pod the last time we was here. I remember it was it. I can tell you exactly what it reminded me of when I initially saw it. I was like, "Wow, this looks like Puerto Rico." When the power went out when they had the hurricane and everyone was trying to get gas from like this one gas station. It looked just like that. It was cars going around the block just trying to get water.
And it's awful, this basic necessity of life. What, our bodies are 70% water, the earth is 70% water, and yet these people have to fight to get it. And then you have people generally who are older who cannot leave their house. They need water delivered. And for a time, the state would deliver it if people needed it.
Yeah.
Not anymore.
The one old couple that we spoke to, all this coming to my head because, like I said, I've been dealing with the footage. The old couple, the older guy that said he had pneumonia, the one that had cancer. He said initially when what water crisis first happened, he had his truck and he was delivering water to people that couldn't get him. Now he doesn't have a car. He has no way of getting water, and he said he'd been before, and by the time he got close to the front, the water was gone. So it's almost like, why bother? Because every time, it's rough. A lot of people have to work. You know what I'm saying? A lot of people may get up a little late, and it's almost like, okay, you get up early enough to get in line, and if you don't, then you kind of out of water and have to risk using the water that's in your home and these filters that may or may not be even useful to block bacteria and things like that.
Yeah, what a lot of people don't realize about those filters, and I'll circle back to the bottled water situation. If you use the hot water even once, the filter doesn't work anymore. So, and
People
if
don't know
little
that.
kid, yeah,
Yeah.
a visitor, they don't know, little kids don't know, you make a mistake and forget. It's not a solution, and they try to pass it off as if it is.
And people shouldn't have to, in America, you shouldn't have to learn how to use a water filter because your government fucked you over. You know what I mean? And
Exactly.
now it's your responsibility. Now the onus is on you. Wait, hey, we know we fucked up the water, but there goes a water filter. So you need to know these 30 rules before you use your
Right.
water every day to make sure that you don't. And make sure you tell your little 6-year-old kid that rips and runs and just does what he wants to do. But you make sure he listens to you when you say, do these 30 things before you turn on a water faucet or before you make yourself a bath. Come on.
Right. It's ridiculous. And one of the other things that came to my mind was I talked to um, this GM widow. You guys might know, like General Motors was huge in Flint. It was how the city was thriving
Yeah.
for a long
Yeah.
time. Um, and but now, GM is gone for the most part. There's still a little bit going on with GM, but these GM widows are left behind. They're older. They don't have an income or a way to go get the water. And so you think about, like, General Motors was one of the first companies to notice, oh, the water isn't right, and so
Yeah.
they immediately switched off of that water. Um, and
The water isn't right. Like
it
GM is
was,
like it's corroding our
yeah,
parts.
like the parts
Imagine,
are so much more important.
imagine that. Imagine that. It's corroding our parts. What that mean that like the Flint River on its own can motherfucking clear rust
Oh.
or whatever. If it's corroding parts and they're using the water, what do you think it would do to a human? Like,
Yep.
think about that. It's corroding metal parts, whatever parts. I'm assuming they're all metal, aluminum. They're engine parts. So they have to be strong type metal. And if it's corroding that, there's no way that it's not obviously putting these metals inside people, triggering cancer cells and doing all that because your body isn't made to have to deal with those things. Like when you get a high content of mercury, your doctor will tell you to stop. You have to stop eating fish. If not, you're gonna have birth defects if you try to have a child or things like that. I mean, there's dogs that have stillborns. Dogs from drinking the water.
Yeah, there's a lot that Jordan always would say Flint is like an onion. You keep peeling back a layer and then there's another layer. There's just so much to it, and it's kind of full circle. GM being one of the first that noticed the water was bad, but they're a very wealthy, very powerful company. So no big deal. We'll just switch to another water source. Meanwhile, the
On the
widows
low.
on the low,
On the low.
yeah, yeah, we'll just do it, and forget that it's corroding our parts, and forget the humans.
You don't need
But
to tell nobody.
but it's like the poor black people, the widows, the families that made GM what it became. They're they're fine drinking the lead water. Let's forget about them. And the corruption goes straight to the top. The entire state. It's it's so disgusting. There are so many layers. Like we could talk
Yeah.
about it forever. But yeah, so
And
this
that
week,
it seems so nuanced, and it only seems nuanced because people are trying. They're scared to tell the truth. Like it's not that nuanced. It's X. It's like it's X, Y, and Z. Like you can connect the dots really easy if people were telling the truth. But for some reason, people just they don't have a conscience and they're looking out for their political careers and their relationships and it starts to seem you have to you have to peel the onion. It seems like you have to peel these onions back because you have to investigate to find out where the dots connect. But if people were being honest and they had any sense of integrity, it's easy. He said this, we did this because of this, and this is what we knew. So then we had them do this. So when they did that, it can make sure that these levels stayed at a certain under a certain threshold. I mean, it's that simple. And that shit, everyone knew what they were doing, except maybe the pawns that were the volunteers that were just told what to do. Obviously, they're just doing their job. But for the most part, everyone knew. And they knew when they were instructed what they were doing.
and even logically, so even people who are well intentioned that we talk to about Flint, they are so shocked because they say, "Oh, the news people say, oh, if someone's lead line is replaced, they should." Okay, people who are well intentioned, when they hear about it, they hear from the news people's lead lines are being replaced. They have filters, so even good people say, okay, that seems fine, right? But what people don't realize is what we talked about already. The filters can, go, they don't work with any minor thing. They don't work past 150 parts per billion of lead. But other than that, once a lead pipe is replaced, it knocks up a bunch of that lead that's been corroded. These pipes are so screwed up, replacing it. And also, people have pipes in their houses that are not being replaced. That's their responsibility. So, and then there's lead
That
can get
and
dislodged from one area and it can go to another area. So, someone who doesn't have lead pipes can still get lead and still do.
Yeah, I just think that's bizarre that you can cause a problem. And now this problem is affecting things that may have been your responsibility. Let's say, the pipes in the homes, they can be the the owners are the person who's renting the home. It's their responsibility, right? So if you look at it in a sensible way, in a rational way, okay, we get that, but if you do something to the water that then leaks into the pipes that I have, I'm responsible for, then you at some point you would think the person that fucked up the line has to then be responsible for changing those because my pipes in my home wouldn't be corroded and wouldn't have the lead that it was in if you didn't decide to change the water. Now the onus is on you, but no one they don't want to do that because you have it's I guess mess their careers up to say, or it'll cost a lot of money. They don't want to have to pay for it to say it's not enough to just to say, yeah, we failed you. Yeah, you got to show by your actions. And if you're not willing to take full responsibility for the city of Flint in every home and in every pipe, then you still haven't done your job, and you still owe the people a lot more than what you're giving them. I'm sorry. There's a lot of um, I don't know,
Little, little,
mysteriously
little creatures are flying, swirling around our
I
heads.
keep crawling on me. So it's not I am just smoking crack. So it's just that
Yeah, they are. So that's really like circling back to the water.
yeah,
That's part of what we're going to really focus on this week. Because if you have a day job, you can't get to the free water.
yeah,
That's not state led, that's volunteer led by churches mainly and then other organizations. If you are elderly, if you don't have a car, you can't
yeah,
get to the water. Um, if you have a life where
You have to be
You
places
have to
during the
be
day because you
somewhere.
got to live and survive.
You have
You can't
kids.
get
You can,
water.
can you imagine standing in line for 4 hours
Yeah.
with, like, you say you have a 4-year-old and a 3-year-old or something like that, like standing for 4 hours to get 2 cases of water that will last you
Let me tell you
a
this.
couple days.
Let me tell you this. California people problems, but this is a good kind of, I guess, a parallel to that. There's a chicken sandwich place in Chinatown in downtown LA that it's popping, and in LA, everyone, as soon as something's new, they jump on it. But this place is actually amazing, right? It's called Howling Rays, but there's a 3-hour wait in line.
Wow.
3-hour wait in line, period, point blank, no matter when you go. It's 3 hours, right? On Sundays, I always decide to go on the Sunday. I'm like, I'm getting this chicken. Oh, that's my entire day. If I
Wow.
have anything planned, I'm not doing it. It's my entire day. It's 3 hours. It's my entire day. So imagine anyone that has to go to work or has to look for a job or have to go on interviews, whatever the case may be. Those 3 hours, those 3 hours they need. You know what I'm saying? And those 3 hours don't guarantee that you get water. It's just hopefully you get water. How discouraging is that? Like I can go wait in this line for 3 hours. If I had to wait in the line and I wasn't and didn't have a guarantee that I was gonna get a chicken sandwich, I ain't waiting in line.
Right.
You know what I mean? So you expecting these people to do some really irrational um, things, man, and instead of saying, you know what, we still don't know if the water's good, so we're gonna keep the pots open. Or just for goodwill, like, yeah, the water's good, but you know what? I understand people still don't trust that the water's good. And I understand that they don't trust it because of what we did. So because of that perception, we're going to just keep the pods open just to make sure that people have a sense of mind.
Right. And just in case people don't know, the water pods were distribution centers for bottled water, basically, run by the state, paid for by the state. And they were spread out in a way that made it not perfect, but it was a lot easier. They were in every ward. People could generally get water. It was still tough. It still wasn't perfect. But now the ones that are left, they're not the state sanctioned, city sanctioned or whatever, or paid for water pods. Now it's just out of the goodness of people's hearts, churches' hearts. People from across the country donate.
Yeah.
So like everyone but the people who should be, everyone is trying. People are trying to help their neighbors out. So we want to interview the church leaders, the people who run these water distribution centers. And can you imagine, like, you're handing out water, you're trying to do good, but then you run out. And can you imagine looking at the line still there and seeing people with young children, seeing the elderly and saying, I'm so sorry, I don't have any more water to give you.
Heartbreaking.
So we're going to try to interview people like that, people who can't leave their home. And so what happens when someone cannot get the bottled water? They end up drinking the tap water, which makes them sicker. So we want
And
to.
it makes them sicker. Bathing in it, it goes into your pores like that. This is what happens. It's sicker. People think just drinking it is the only thing. No, showering in it, all that.
And people.
Washing your clothes.
And a lot of Flint residents have noted to us lead is not the only issue by far. So in order to correct some of the other water problems, they had to add other things in it. And like all water distribution systems, add chlorine, but when you have to add a certain amount, it creates a high level of disinfection byproducts, the TTHMs, which can cause rashes, which can cause inhalation issues. It's even been linked to
Asthma.
it's been linked to and then certain other things in the water are linked to kidney problems, and it's just they add one thing to the water to correct the other, the phosphates
Because
to try to
water
coat
is
the
not
pipes.
supposed to have that shit in it.
That's true.
Of course, it will cause problems in your kidney. Shit.
Yeah.